No, I'd rather be French.
We ended up in this mess because of Boris Johnson and his lies, and all of the other people that backed Brexit, because right from the get-go they were lying about Brexit and not giving people the real information that they needed, which was tedious to examine, but they preferred to tell people that everything would be fine, that Brexit could be a Canada deal and there wouldn't be any trade barriers, and that was just an outright lie. It always meant trade barriers. Canada has a deal with the European Union, and guess what? It has trade barriers. It has non-tariff barriers, because in Canada they produce food to different standards. They use hormones and chemicals which are banned in the European Union. So of course they have trade barriers, because they don't want to change their standards just for a trade deal with the European Union, who they don't actually export that much to. It's not rocket science.
Majority of people that I've met in England that are English, no, not all of them, obviously you can't speak for everyone ever, but there's a good proportion of them that are just horrible people. The government sucks, the weather's awful, the job market's terrible, we get paid terribly. Obviously the NHS now was really good, and now it's not being funded nearly enough, but when can it ever be funded enough? I don't know. No, I'm not particularly proud to be British. And we've got awful stereotypes for the rest of the world. I mean, we're the most obnoxious twats when it comes to holidays, and it's just horrible. We refuse to learn other people's languages, and it's disgusting. No, I'd rather be French.
So this week, Kemi Badenoch was on LBC, and a caller rang in to ask about Brexit. And it's quite extraordinary how we've got so used to government ministers just lying their way through these things, and you know, it's down to us to keep pointing this out, showing the receipts, and reminding people how we ended up where we are. So anyway, have a look. Here's the clip.
My question is that as you, Kemi Badenoch, you voted for Brexit, how well you think the British economy is going, especially as we were the first economy in trade history to raise barriers with our major trading partners, and the trade deals done so far are really very small, and don't a small beer compared with the trade arrangement of the EU. Thank you.
So we haven't, certainly we didn't originally raise barriers. We actually didn't raise barriers. The EU did.
That's just a blatant lie. The Brexit that we ended up with is the Brexit which we chose, which meant trade barriers. It's just that Boris Johnson went out and lied to everyone and said there wouldn't be trade barriers.
And that was one of the risks I think that we were aware of, that there might be some retaliation for us leaving.
The Business and Trade Secretary claiming that the European Union have retaliated because we decided to leave is just completely and utterly scapegoating, gaslighting reality. We were given a choice of different deals, and here are the deals in the stairway to Brexit. And Boris Johnson chose the hardest, most severe deal, which was the Canada deal. So he wanted the same deal with a country on the other side of the Atlantic, which actually is heavily reliant on the United States for their trade. Unlike us, you know, obviously they're next to America, we're next to Europe, but he decided to go for that deal. And Canada hardly export anything to the European Union, particularly not any of their meat. Since they had the CETA deal, it was too difficult. They had trouble with vets and inspections and the trade barriers. This is the deal that Britain got lumbered with because of the Conservatives led by Boris Johnson. And here is Boris Johnson in 2018 arguing with Robert Peston, who is giving the public the truth about the choices behind Brexit.
Manufacturers based in the UK, they say they would be very significantly damaged.
Well, I disagree with that. And
why?
The evidence is very clear.
From where?
across the world where you have just-in-time supply across Southeast Asia, for instance, and indeed in our own continent.
Which is all based on membership of the single market.
No, they're not.
It is.
Well, then they're not. With great respect, Robert, they're not.
Okay, give me an example of somewhere on this continent that is not in the EU and not part of the single market, which is benefiting from just-in-time manufacturing.
Switzerland.
Switzerland is effectively in the single market. You know that by the multiplicity.
Switzerland.
It is effectively in the single market. You know that it is.
There are plenty of. Let me give you an example. If you look at the. You asked for on this continent. I'll give you an example. Not on this continent, it is already the case that components move just as fluidly from Singapore into Dahlewitz in Berlin, across to Derby or wherever Rolls-Royce assembles them, and then back again. It is completely fluid.
You're right, because the bit that matters in this bit is the bit between Germany and the UK, which you just used as an example.
I don't know why you're continuing to treat this as a matter of hilarity.
It's not hilarity. It's worrying.
About to impose barriers.
Yes, but the reason why, and this is one of the interesting things about how these things play out, the reason why is because we have a lot of stakeholders, farmers, for example, who want a level playing field, and this is where the tension between the free markets and the protectionism comes in.
Oh, so now it's farmers' fault that we've got non-tariff barriers, nothing to do with the Conservatives and the deal that they chose. It's farmers' fault for wanting a level playing field. And don't forget about the fact that the Conservatives promised farmers that everything would be absolutely fine and dandy outside of Europe, and they'd have everything that they wanted, including higher subsidies and less competition, less imports, when actually we've got more and we're not able to export our own goods to our biggest market in Europe now. And yet she's saying it's farmers' fault. Incredible.
That if you pick a free market, free trade strategy, you need to, again, risk appetite comes into it. You need to decide how far you are going to go. But what I would stress is that we do have the most comprehensive free trade agreement with the EU. No other country in the world has this. So
so now the Business and Trade Secretary is trying to oversell the actually pretty awful deal that we have, particularly in comparison to the deal that we used to have with our biggest trade partner. She's trying to make out that we've got an exceptional and individual deal. When it came off the peg, it was a Canada deal. And it's terrible for Britain because, unlike Canada, we don't have another big market to rely on. Canada has the United States of America.
Deals which we are doing are in addition to that, not instead of. And many people talk about the benefits being so small. You look at the figures for what's happened with trade with Australia since we signed the FTA. Far more than any of the models predicted. It is going gangbusters. We are now the fourth largest exporter in the world. On services exporters, we are doing brilliantly. I think we're the second largest
you are putting up barriers.
In the world. Yes, but other things have come down. So we've removed tariffs, for example. We've removed loads of tariffs. And the cost of living crisis has actually hidden quite a lot of what has been done. We've removed tariffs on lots of products, which became cheaper, but inflation has masked.
Creating an economy which only caters for services is totally unrealistic. We are an island and we all need commodities such as food, clothing and other goods. And Brexit is having a huge impact on the goods industry, which is why much of British business is going absolutely spare with this government.
If you're a delicatessen owner in Britain, I can't remember when this comes in, but it's imminent if it hasn't already happened, and you're importing cheeses from Italy, for example, you're going to be faced with a bill for every time you import them up to £145. Now that cannot be absorbed by the importer, so it's going to have to be passed on to the consumer. Therefore, inflation goes up again.
So in a manner of speaking, inflation, there are lots of different products that will have more of an impact on inflation than others. But, interest rates.
Oh, yeah, you can thank Liz Truss for those interest rate spikes.
And so on. Those are the things that will really, really have an impact. The owner of that delicatessen is also able to source cheaper products from all over the world in a way that they couldn't beforehand.
Oh, Kemi's off again. She's trying to make out that we've improved trading with the rest of the world since Brexit, which is absolute nonsense. We had the best trade deals in the European Union and the single market. We had the protections of the single market, which meant that we have trade barriers to products which are of lower standard than ours, as well as we had full access to countries like Australia and New Zealand through WTO and other arrangements. And a deli owner cannot find items that you get from Italy and France, mozzarella or camembert or any of these products which actually have protected status within the European Union, a status which our products used to enjoy when we were in the European Union, from Stilton cheese to Melton Mowbray pies. There's all sorts of things that we have lost because of Brexit, and saying that we can source something to fill a deli from somewhere else in the world is just nonsense.
Free trade agreement to involve accepting EU rules on competition policy, subsidies, social protection, the environment, or anything similar, any more than the EU should be obliged to accept UK rules. The UK will maintain the highest standards in these areas, better in many respects than those of the EU, without the compulsion of a treaty. And it is vital to say this now, clearly, because we have so often been told that we must choose between full access to the EU market, along with accepting its rules and courts, on the Norway model, or a free trade agreement, which opens up markets and avoids the full panoply of EU regulation, like the Canada deal. Well, folks, I hope you got the message by now. We've made a choice. We want a comprehensive free trade agreement similar to Canada's. But in the unlikely event that we do not succeed, then our trade will have to be based on our existing withdrawal agreement with the EU. And let's be clear, the choice is emphatically not deal or no deal. We have a deal. We've done it. And it did indeed turn out, as I correctly prophesied, to be oven ready. The question is whether we agree a trading relationship with the EU comparable to Canada's, or more like Australia.